That's when I was like, hold the phone. What is it? I can't just sit here and be the victim. Why are these men attracted to me? What is it about me that is contributing to this situation? Why is my picker so broken?
Welcome to The Details with Allison Kahler, a space for real divorce stories and grounded conversations with experts, helping you find clarity and courage as you step into a future that may look different than you expected and better than you thought possible. My guest today is Renee Froyo. Renee is a professional storyteller who helps companies and founders to articulate and share the stories behind their brands. And today, Renee shares her divorce story. Together, we talk about all things stories and storytelling, about the stories we've told ourselves historically, about the stories we use to justify things, about the stories that hold us back, and about taking the pen and rewriting our stories for the future. Let's get into my conversation with Renee. Welcome to The Details, Renee.
Thank you for having me, Allison.
So I actually want to start by reading a LinkedIn post that you wrote, which is how I got introduced to you for the first time. And you were writing about one of your close friends who was navigating divorce. And so I'm going to read an excerpt from that post where you say, "I was once in that position too. I was stuck in a story held up by lies we kept telling ourselves. But when I finally decided to open my eyes to the reality of my situation and accept that our stories were incompatible, the answer about what I should do became so undeniably clear. And now, 7 years post-separation and happily on the other side, I can say the risk and all its misery was worth it because I now get to live life more honestly in all areas of my life. So many of us get stuck inside the stories we tell ourselves about who we are or who we should be. And then we come up with more stories to justify the situation. Learning how to tell more honest stories is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and each other." Wow. And that's just a part of it. So people should go actually read the full post. But I was just so struck by this concept of stories, given that this show, The Details, is really all about stories. So I'd love to start by just saying, first and foremost, we'll come back to your story in a minute, but what's it like now, 7 years post-divorce, seeing a friend go through this?
That's funny. I think since my divorce, I've become everybody's go-to divorce friend, right? I have friends of friends who say, oh, someone's going through a really hard time. Would it be okay if I gave them your number? Always. Yes, I feel like that's my role now. Also because I think I landed in such a good situation. So what's it like seeing a friend go through it? As you can imagine, I have a lot of empathy for her. And I think I want to be careful not to be prescriptive and give her advice necessarily. All we can do is really say, this is what it was like from my experience, right? This is what I see from other people's experience who are now all my friends are divorcees. But, you really have to figure out the right answer for your relationship for yourself. And the best way to do that is really figure yourself out. With anyone going through a hard time, I think I just keep coming back to, what else are you not understanding about yourself that is keeping you stuck in a state of indecision about this? And it's a hard question,
Well, and it sounds like as you were reflecting back on your own divorce experience, it sounds like you can see now what some of those stories were that kept
for
you.
myself. Mm-hmm.
Was that something you were aware of at the time or something that only became clear in hindsight to you?
I mean, I knew I wasn't happy for a long time, and I don't know how aware I was of how much I was justifying that unhappiness with. Well, it's because of something I'm contributing, or it's because we have young kids and this is always hard for everybody in this stage, or, whatever other excuses I was making and stories I was spinning up. I really think it was more in hindsight and upon reflection. And actually, it really took after I started the divorce process with my ex-husband. I dated for about 2.5 years. just like, that was my coping mechanism. I was like, we split and immediately, like within the next week, I was on the dating apps and I was just like, I'm going to date everyone in San Francisco. Some people are like, I never want to be in a relationship again. And it's not that I was looking for a relationship. I think I was looking for validation. I was in my mid 30s with 2 kids and I was like, am I still going to be wanted? And I think I was also just really looking for connection. I didn't have an intimate connection in my marriage. And I think I was seeking that wherever I could find it. And anyway, I ended up getting into another relationship that lasted about 6 months. And that guy was completely lying to me about everything. He fabricated the fact that he graduated from school, that he was in a certain job, that all lies, right? And that's when I was like, hold the phone. What is it? I can't just sit here and be the victim. Why are these men attracted to me? What is it about? It's like, what is it about me that is contributing to this situation? Why is my picker so broken, right? It's because it can't just be, that I just tend to attract, I attract a certain type of person. Or that it's all them, right? So that's when I really started doing the work. I'm like, what is it that I'm looking for, that I'm missing, or that I'm needing? And like, what am I lacking that I'm looking to fill with a man, a partner in the situation that leads me to this certain type of person that I'm incompatible with, right? And that was really when the reflective work started. And I got myself a good therapist who asked hard questions and was sort of like a motherly figure. She wasn't one of those. She was actually like pretty directive. She was like, I think this. A lot of therapists don't do that.
That sounds pretty rare for a therapist.
I liked that about her. I wanted that. I wanted someone to be like, cut the bullshit. And she really questioned me when then I found my now relationship in those early months. She was like, I don't know, sounds like maybe another codependent relationship to me. And I'm like, I think you're wrong. And she was wrong. She was completely wrong. We're 6 years into our relationship, and it's the healthiest, happiest relationship I've ever been in. And he's helping me still learn how to communicate within a relationship and really truly be intimate, I think is the biggest thing. And that led to all these stories come back to our early years, our early experiences, how we were formed. And through actually my work and telling stories and digging in and telling more personal stories and trying to get that out of people for their work and their life is when I really kind of started to uncover that thread. And what I believe, or at least the story I'm telling now, is that I lost my dad and my brother when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
So my older brother, Danielle, was 11 when he died it was a pool accident. There was electricity in the pool and he was shocked when he jumped in. And then a year later, my dad died. And he had already had a drinking problem. And after the death of my brother, he just couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle the heartache and the tragedy. And so my mom says he died of a broken heart, which is 100% true. And so, as a young girl, I lost the 2 most important men in my life, right?
Yeah.
And I think when I then went through life, because I really don't have a hard time with relationships in general, right? I have solid relationships with my family. I have amazing girlfriends. But when it came to men, I think I was always pretty guarded, right? That loss made me to survive as a kid and then through early adolescence. I put up such a protective barrier that I didn't realize. I always saw it as a strength. I'm so resilient. You can't get me down. I'm really an optimist. I think I'm just this way by nature too, But what it really was also was a shell, was a shield. And I never fully allowed myself to truly be intimate with anybody because I was afraid of loss, right? So anytime anyone got too close, I think I didn't even know what to do with that.
How did that relationship with intimacy, how did that play into your marriage, right? Before you got to the point of divorce and separation, but, in the early parts of your relationship, how did that come into play?
Looking back on it, I think one of the reasons that made it work for both of us was because we both had that guard. And so we were both coming into this relationship with that inability to be truly intimate and vulnerable and seen, right? and that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But I think it's what made it. That's probably to an extent what attracted us to each other. You know, we could have sort of
Yeah.
this level of independence within the relationship, but that's a really lonely place to be, you know,
Yeah.
over the course of a marriage and everything that happens in a marriage and everything you have to navigate in life and work and kids and aging parents and all those life transitions. So yeah, but then it really started to creep up and cause all those cracks. You know,
Yeah.
we struggled with all forms of intimacy, and he maybe dealt with it by diving into work. He was gone all the time. He traveled always as part of the work. He did really well financially. He was very successful in that realm of his life, but then came home to me, you know, who also dove into projects and work and friendships, but ultimately I was really lonely in my marriage, and
Yeah.
I think he must have been too, you know.
So I'm curious because this was sort of the way that you were conditioned or grew up for this like lack of intimacy and you sort
Hmm.
of like attracted like was there like this growing sense of like I want this to be different even though it's what's familiar? What was the shift for you?
Yeah. There was definitely a growing sense of I want this to be different. I asked for it. I definitely, it's not like I was just passive in my marriage. I was like, this is broken. I
Yeah.
tried to fix it. And there were other issues that I couldn't fix. Even with all the group therapy and talking and awareness, there were just things about him that I could not fix, right?
Mm.
He's broken in other ways. But I ultimately, what led to the shift, it was not voluntary necessarily. Let's just say I found out something that made it easy for me to finally walk
Mm.
away. And it was like, I don't know why I had to wait 7 years to do that. But you know, it's hard when you're
Yeah.
in a difficult relationship to really understand what's even happening, to be able to see it and say, this isn't right. This isn't what I need. This isn't what I want.
Yeah.
This isn't good for our kids. It's hard almost to explain it to other people unless there's some external thing that happens that makes
Yeah.
it, that gives you the excuse, I guess. I was looking for an excuse and I got
Yeah.
an excuse. And then it made it easy to make the decision. But
Yeah.
even then, even within like the separation period, and it took me, I think, 4 years to finalize my divorce, which is short for some people. Sometimes I have
Yeah.
friends who, you know, 6, 7, 8 years. But in that separation period, there was even a little bit of back and forth where I was like, is
Yeah.
this the right thing? Maybe this is fixable. Maybe it's not, you know, but it was pretty clear.
I think
Hmm.
that's the thing that's so tough about it is, you know, sometimes there are those catalysts where it is so
Hmm.
undeniably clear. But it sounds like even in that case, it was still really this hard, like, can we fix this? Can we not? And I think that can be some of the hardest phase, right?
Yeah.
Of really
Yeah.
wrestling with that until you say, yeah, it's done
Hmm.
and it's time to move forward.
I think another thing that really helped me have that realization too are all those dates I went on where I was really, for the first time, I say, like, I felt like I had little left to lose at this point. So I was pretty
Mm,
unapologetically myself. I really had to process through talking. So these poor guys, I get them on the stand. Like, let me tell you what's going on in my life. How are you? I'm like, don't ask me that question. My Uber driver, you know, like the gardener, anybody. They're like, ask
yeah.
innocent, how are you doing today? And I gave them an honest answer. But what I realized in that is that it just opened up that space of
Yeah.
intimacy and honesty for them to
Yeah.
reciprocate with what was really going on for them, right? So I actually
Yeah.
started finding all these like true moments of connection and intimacy. And I was like, oh man, the more honest I can be with myself and other people
Yeah.
about what's going on, the more honest they can be in return and the more connected I can be to my fellow human, the more I can feel seen, the more I can see other
Yeah.
people, you know, and that's really, it's like really informed a lot of like just how I do live my life and certainly how I run my business and what I teach in terms of
Yeah.
storytelling and why it's such an important skill set, not just for work, but for understanding your life, you know?
I think that's something that resonated so much when we met for the first time was this concept of like intimacy isn't just physical intimacy, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's this sense of connection. And I've heard the phrase like intimacy is into me, you see, like, but this sense
Oh,
of
I haven't heard that.
Well, there
You
we
just
go.
taught me something new.
There we go.
I like that.
But yeah, the sense of seeing someone else truly for who they are and to be seen in return is, I think, just one of the greatest gifts that we can have. And whether it's because we're not showing up as our full selves because of all of the layers of programming or different things, or if somebody else just gets so familiar and they just were in the daily routines and they stop seeing you, it's the sense of the lack of connection is a lack of being seen, I feel like a lot of times. And so
Yeah.
the divorce experience, for all the misery, as you said, for all the misery that comes with it,
Yeah.
one of the beautiful benefits, and I think we both experienced this in our divorces, is like when you start to open up and be vulnerable with other people, the Uber driver, random people
Right.
at work, and share, it creates a sense of connection. And that feels really good.
Yeah. Yeah. I was playing around with this word intimacy because I'm working on a workshop for corporate, and intimacy is just such a word that that word that means like you don't say sex in the workplace, and it's not. It's exactly. It seems it's provocative almost, but I think it's like the next level that we need to aspire to because there's so much fake connection, right? And there's so much like. Especially just how all of us are living so much of our lives online and connecting, right, through social media. And there is some genuine, authentic connection that happens there. Like you really resonated with that story I shared, but that takes a lot, right? For me to share that, for you to stop to read it. And so I'm not saying write this kind of stuff every day or show up in this kind of way every day, but I think we're tired of attempts at connection and are actually really like everyone's so lonely. It's a thing, right? It's the loneliness epidemic. So maybe we really like the next, like what we really should be striving for is that intimacy into you see me, and how do we achieve that?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, it's funny in the business context, because we came across this on LinkedIn and you do storytelling within, a brand building capacity. One of the things I learned in my time in management consulting, it was a lot about relationship building. And one of the key elements of relationship building is trust. And so there's this thing called the trust equation I was taught probably 5 years into my life in management consulting. And trust equals credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. So, I mean, the thing that was always so interesting from a consulting perspective is a lot of times the people I worked with would crush it on credibility and reliability, right? Like we would do the analysis, we would know all of the data, we'd deliver stuff on time, right? So we're credible and reliable. But where people fall down are the other two. It's the intimacy side. You're not getting to know someone beyond a transactional relationship in the work context. And you really focus on like, what do I need from you rather than the other orientation?
right.
And I think part of what resonated just about your LinkedIn post for me, for example, is like, one, you shared so much about yourself. Like I felt that I could see you through this experience and I felt seen because I was like, yeah, I felt that way too. Right. And by you putting this out there, there was a lot of other orientation, right? Like you didn't have to put all of that information about your personal life online, right? There's this sense of, I think, you tell me if this is right for you, but this sense of like, I'm hoping that this reaches someone or touches somebody by putting this out in the world. And so that's the content that I think resonates in this day and age, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It is.
I feel like that's a great segue into storytelling. And so you do this professionally. Just tell us a little bit about what that means, and then maybe we can learn a little bit of like, how can we all tell our stories a little bit better?
Well, I do it professionally in a couple of ways. I do it for brands, and a lot of that is through content marketing, right? It's brand building, it's messaging to get to that universal human condition, that resonance that can be present throughout the world that each little brand is building, and then how we reach people in online spaces. So there's that part of my work. And then there's another part where I work with individuals like you, coaches, consultants, creatives, freelancers, founders, like anyone trying to build a brand online to achieve the same thing. And it's so much easier, actually. Well, it's easier and harder in some ways. I try to tell people like brands are trying to achieve the level of personality that you have as a person, right?
Yeah.
But then it's really tough for individuals because it's like, how much of my personality and my personal story do I share to reach that, to ultimately gain that trust, to
Yeah.
then get people to hire me, buy my thing, invest in me, give me a consulting gig, whatever it is. And just as you said, I shared, it's my story, it's your story, but it's a universal story, right? And the more I share, the more you feel safe to share your story with me. And so as on a personal level, it's just standing out online. Yeah, it's the more you can share, but from a place of also not necessarily bleeding your heart out online and, sharing all these personal details, unless I think there's a space for that too, honestly. But it depends on what you want to do. It depends on where you're going with it, what your goals are, and
Yeah.
what you're trying to accomplish. So you have to balance it a little bit with perception, shaping that perception. So these are lessons I've learned, these are insights I've gained, or this is how I'm thinking about it. But ultimately, right now, the only way we're standing out is with the way we think, right? And the ideas that we own and the values that we have, right? So there is a values alignment between the two of us, right? And there's no way for you to know that unless I demonstrate what those values are, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, how you do it, I take people through a process on how to actually do it. But I would say it just starts with honestly showing up as honestly
Yeah.
as possible, in keeping in mind what your goals are, what you're trying to
Yeah.
do with it all, why you're showing up. Not just I have a story to share, but why this story right now on this platform in this moment.
I can imagine there's a lot of people, especially just given everything that's going on in the job landscape right now. A lot of
Yeah.
people are stepping into this world of freelance or consulting or
Yeah.
coaching, et cetera. So we'll be sure to link all your information and talk about at the end where people can find you if they want to do this work. And I bet regardless of if people are building a brand or building a personal brand, the work that you do in storytelling is going to be really powerful for anyone. And so, given that it can be such a source of connection, if people are navigating the divorce process or figuring out how to share their stories, is there any learning or insight that you can share with people, even just from a personal perspective there?
Well, all good storytellers and all good stories start with noticing. So that's step number one. If you do nothing else, start noticing.
Noticing what?
Noticing everything in your life that
Okay.
makes you feel something. So I started this exercise. It comes from Matthew Dix, who's a really well-known storyteller. He's written several books, but he got really well-known for winning all the grants. He won all the moth competitions. So oral
Okay.
storytelling, right? And then he wrote books about storytelling. And one of the things that he does to constantly have stories that has this knock-on effect is what he calls homework for life. And it's every day at the end of the day, he keeps a log. This sounds like journaling, but it's not, because a lot of people are like, I can't get into journaling as much as I tried. Journaling really is the way, like, journaling is the best way to do it. But if you don't want to journal, if that sounds like a chore, and I start and stop journals all the time throughout my life, this seemed much easier, is just taking a note of one thing that if you were to tell a story from your day, what would it be about? And what is a story ultimately? It's giving meaning to events, right? To things that happened. So it's not a story without a change and without some sort of transformation, even the slightest one, I went to the store and I bought bread and I made a sandwich. It's not a story, but I went to the store and I bought bread, and then I realized what I wanted was not actually a sandwich. I wanted pasta. And so then I realized then you're getting into more of a story, but bad story.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what is the story?
You're making me
It's a moment of
hungry.
change. I know. A story is a moment of change. So
Yeah.
if you want to and we're having these little moments of change every day throughout our lives. Something like, why did that make me angry? Or why did that make me smile? Or why did that make me stop and think? Or what was it something, my kid said something. And when you start noticing, taking just like a moment to notice every day, you realize every single day in your life has so much meaning. And you're when you take a moment to assign it meaning, right? You can start forming those stories. So that's like one way to like really become a storyteller of your life that can be transformational in and of itself. And the next one is really just to take moments, pause, and reflect. And it can be, you can ritualize it, right? You can make it quarterly, you can make it annually. A lot of us do, right? But we also, a lot of times I think focus on our goals for the future when we take those moments to pause, ritualize the year, right? Like New Year's, what do we hope for this year? Birthdays, we're like, instead of asking, what did this past year teach me? How did I change? What insights did I get? Where do I still feel stagnant? Where do I feel stuck? So it's just having a practice of noticing and reflecting.
Yeah.
Instead of looking forward all the time. To really look forward with clear eyes, you have to look back.
It strikes me like how these concepts of noticing, of reflecting, of making meaning are just so relevant for the different phases of the divorce journey. I mean, I know like it's interesting. Some people ask me like, well, you're 7.5 years post-divorce. Like, why now? Why is this happening now? And it's like, honestly, for a bit of time, I didn't want to think about it. I wanted to, as you said, like, I wanted to go out and date. I wanted to redecorate my new apartment. It was very forward looking. It was like, what do I want the next chapter of my life to look like? But it was really going back and unearthing. And I've been doing this recently, actually, of reading back through old journals because I am a journaler and I wrote this stuff down. It's like, how do I make meaning from these things even 7.5 years later? And I think that's where a lot of the healing can come in the divorce experience, right? And it's going to be very individualized for every single person. There's no one right approach, et cetera. Some people can process it and kind of make that meaning in the moment. Some people need some distance, and like all of that is okay, right? But I think if you have a journaling practice when you're early in those phases of contemplation, certainly that I did, just noticing and writing things down, I maybe wasn't able to make meaning of it in the time, but now looking back on those things, it's like, wow, I'm learning so much about this version of myself from the past and what's grown and changed since then. So
I would love to know one thing that you read recently from one of those old journals that really, I don't know, that either showed where you are now. Like, what did that help you understand something about yourself and where you are now? Is there anything that...
I mean, a big thing, and actually the episode that we'll release very soon, we're recording this in the very beginning of April, but the episode that's released on April 7th is about this. I actually read from one of my journals, and it was through the contemplation phase. And I would say that episode is really about how I was writing in my journals at the time that I was really struggling with decision. But if you read the journals, it's written very clearly there that I knew that the marriage was over at that point in time, but I just was not trusting myself. And so I stayed in that limbo contemplation phase. The broader pattern and what I know about myself now is that I spent 99.9% of my life in my head, in my intellect, thinking about things, analyzing things, coming up with pros and cons lists, trying to, as you wrote in your post, come up with stories to justify the stories, right? And, I was stuck in this place. And it was analysis paralysis. And what I've learned over time is to trust some of those instincts a little bit more so that it doesn't take me quite so long to get to actions and decisions now. What about you? Were you a journaler at the time of your divorce? And did you do a similar exercise?
Yeah, I think I journal I'm more of a journaler in times of crisis. Definitely. It's that needing to process verbally in some way, shape or form. Yeah, I was recently reading back actually on some of the earlier ones. And more than anything, it helped me think through where I am today. One of the things I wrote is I just hope that we can get to a place where we can really be friends. Right. And where we can be friends and partners for these kids. And like, it was just like, it was really hard. And there was a lot of anger. And it seemed pretty bleak and hopeless. but I still held out. Yeah, I was like, one day this will be different. And I'm going to be reading back on this one day. And that was 7 years ago. And I was reading it a few months ago, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm glad I held out hope. Because I think in holding out, I was also sort of manifesting that future too, you know? It's like,
Yeah.
even though it seems so hopeless and dire right now, I'm going to keep pushing for that story, that future that I really want. It was validating the power of really recognizing what you want and continuing to push for that future, right? I think that's a lot. I think that's a lot about story. That's a lot of storytelling too. It's like we're actively, constantly writing the story of the future, right?
Yeah.
We're using the past to help inform, but like we're really actively in the moment with the decisions that we're making, with the steps that we're taking, writing that as individuals and as a collective. And there's a lot of power in doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's power and agency in I am writing my story
Yeah.
versus these events happened to
To
me,
me, yes,
right?
absolutely.
It's a
Yeah.
totally different way of seeing the world. And it can feel hard, if not impossible, I think, in some moments to take that posture, right? And so also giving ourselves self-compassion when we fall into those places of like, this is happening to me, there's nothing I can do. It's like having self-compassion for those moments, I think is really important too. But when you feel ready to take the pen, to write the next chapter, to decide when you're going to turn the page, I think that's where so much of this power comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're going through something hard, right? It always feels like this will never end, right? It can feel I don't know when I will be able to see the end of the tunnel, right? And then when you're in a good place though, when you're in the middle of just peace and calm and happiness, you worry about when it's going to end. Right?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that like constantly, at least for me, what I
Yeah.
feel like I'm toggling back and forth between. And I don't, and it makes sense as like conscious beings, but I think being able to have places where you can like somewhere where you can go back to those hard times and reminding yourself constantly that did pass, and then now you're dealing with something else that's tough, but I don't know. For me, it's helped me get through hard times, and it's not without feeling so desperate or hopeless within the transition.
One thing that's coming to me is like for people that are not journalers, even just having conversations with people. And I think you mentioned at the beginning that you seem to be the person that people come to when they're going through divorce or a hard time because you've gone through it. I found that to be the case after I was post-divorce too. But I think just having this sense of shared humanity and connection to people that have gone through something similar can help you process it. And that's something, if I look back on my own experience, I wish I would have done. I think I looked around and didn't see other people my age who were going through divorce. I got divorced at 33. And so I didn't feel comfortable opening up to that many people. But gosh, as soon as I started to tell people and I felt that kind of connection and support back, even if they couldn't totally understand exactly my situation, it meant so much and allowed me to start to process. I might not have been making meaning at that time, but I at least was able to process some of those things that I was noticing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we talked about this in an earlier conversation about what got you through. For me, it was talking to everybody, but I was also I made a lot of friends in my period of divorce that were also going through divorce. And that only happened because I was open about it, because I was actively seeking it. And I would highly encourage anyone that's going through it to seek those people. So yes, tell people who can connect you with a divorcee friend who might end up being your best friend. 3 of my best friends now in the Bay Area are all moms I met during my divorce. And one of them I picked up where we picked each other up at the playground. We have 2 little girls the same age. And I would look around. She didn't have a ring on her finger. And I didn't have a ring on my finger. So she was like, we started talking. She's, first about our kids. And then I was like, so are you married? And we just like, and then it was just like, we could talk about anything,
Yeah.
And another one who I had worked with previously, but didn't know that well. I ran into her at a cafe. How are things going? She was completely honest. Well, I'm going through a terrible divorce right now. So things are like kind of chaotic mess. Oh my God, me too. And then we started talking and we ended up being COVID pandemic, like our pod together. So we went on several trips together with our kids and she's still one of my closest friends.
Yeah.
So it was.
It's one of these, like the divorced club is not one that I think anybody seeks to be part of.
No, but it's really
But
good.
once you are initiated and you're in it, like there's just, you like short circuit or like shortcut the like friend development time frame. It happens so quickly. So
yeah.
Yeah. And so my wish for, anybody that's listening is if you are feeling alone to reach out to anyone, even if you don't know them super well, that may have gone through it. Because I would say like anybody that has come to me, it's like, girl, let's go get a glass of wine or a cup of coffee and like, let's just talk it all out. And I think those can be some of like the closest friendships that show up through this. One of the greatest gifts that comes out of a really tough situation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Renee, as we wrap up today's conversation, is there anything else that's on your mind or on your heart that you'd want to share with people?
Divorce has so much stigma and ultimately a negative sort of connotation around it, but I think it's just one of the greatest gifts for so many people. And I remember reading this article titled, "Can we please stop feeling sorry for the kids of divorce?" Like stop, and it made me like, can we stop feeling sorry for divorced people, for divorced women, for divorced men, and certainly divorced kids? That article was all about how these kids grow up with so much more people in their lives and exposure to different ways of being in the world. Whereas in the nuclear family, actually in the States, it's very unnatural how kids are being raised, right? Yeah. With two parents and two perspectives and two ways of doing things, when we used to be raised by the whole village, right? And the aunties and the neighbors and the grandmas. And actually, you create a situation for your kids during divorce in a lot of cases for that, right? And so they become very well-rounded in a lot of cases, I think. But similar to when I meet people who've gone through it or going through it, I always say, I'm so sorry and congratulations, because when you are on the other side of it and you found your way, I see all the silver linings and all the gifts it's given me. I mean, I co-parent, so I don't see my kids half the time, and that's hard, but it's also afforded me this life where I can travel and take care of myself and tend to the things I need to and then show up as the best version of myself for my kids, right? And it's allowed me to have this incredibly connected, close, tight group of girlfriends, and it's allowed me to understand myself in ways I never did before and live this more honest existence. And there's just so many gifts, really, that have come from it. So I guess to wrap up is just to say that it's hard. I don't really wish it upon people, but it's not a tragedy necessarily. It doesn't have to be. It can be an awakening when it is, I think, for so many people. I hope that people can find that light on the other side.
Beautiful. What a lovely message to end our beginning, middle, and end of our story today. So you are such a beautiful storyteller. I have only read a bit of your work, but everything I've read has been just really, really powerful. If people are interested in working with you or getting in touch, where can they find you?
They can find me online on LinkedIn. I post pretty consistently under my name, and I have a newsletter called A Good Reputation. So it's about storytelling, but it's really about building a meaningful business and meaningful life, and my constant attempts and questions at how to get there and teach you how to become a better storyteller of your life and work along the way. So those are the two places I would send people.
Wonderful. Well, I'm excited to follow along and read your newsletter. Thank you for being with us today, Renee. Thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for guiding all of us on how to tell our stories a little bit better too.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Renee. I hope you feel inspired to write your own story. And if you feel called to share it, please reach out. I'm always looking for new guests to have on the show. Thanks again. Don't forget to hit that follow or subscribe button, and we'll see you next week.